You look fine. You smile, you function. But inside, you've been gone for years. Most people won't notice, but you do. You notice it in the way your laughter doesn't echo anymore, in how you scroll for hours and forget what you were looking for, in how you say, "I'm fine" on autopilot, because saying more feels like too much. You've mastered the art of disappearing while still showing up, and here's the hardest part. No one taught you how to come back. Carl Jung once wrote, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." But what if your disappearance wasn't avoidance? What if it was survival? Because once upon a time, being fully present got you hurt. Being seen meant being judged. Being open meant being rejected. So without even knowing it, you stepped back. You faded out of the frame. You became a ghost in your own story, not in one dramatic moment, but in tiny decisions. You stopped correcting people when they misunderstood you. You stopped finishing your sentences. You started smiling, even when it felt wrong in your body. You didn't disappear all at once. You vanished slowly, strategically, because invisibility felt safer than rejection, because drifting hurt less than being pinned down. You were brilliant. Your nervous system chose self-erasure over self-destruction, and it worked. You kept the peace. You avoided the edge. You survived. But now survival feels like suffocation. You're not falling apart. You're realizing that the silence you once used as a shield has become your cage. So you're here, listening, not because you're lost, but because a part of you is starting to remember. Remember what it feels like to laugh without checking the room, to cry without apologizing, to speak without shrinking. That part of you, soft, buried, exiled, is still alive. And it's asking, why did I disappear from my own life? And maybe more importantly, what would it take to return, not as an echo, not as a role, but as yourself? Take a breath, a deep one, not for show, for you. This is how it begins, not with a breakthrough, but with a moment of presence right now. This breath, this listening, it's the first time in a long time you've paused not to please, not to escape, but to simply be. You are here, not fully, not yet, but enough to begin the journey home, enough to ask the question, if I stop disappearing, what kind of life might actually fit me? You didn't choose to disappear, you were trained to. There was a time when presence felt dangerous, when being seen meant being scrutinized, when needing meant being punished or ignored. So you did what any intelligent nervous system would do. You became what the moment demanded, you became polite, you became agreeable, you became easy to love by making yourself hard to know, and people praised you for it. They called you mature, resilient, selfless, but beneath that praise was a body that flinched every time someone got too close, a voice that trembled just before it lied and said, "Sure, I don't mind." You said yes before you even knew what they were asking. You laughed at things that didn't feel good. You kept answering texts with emojis because typing your truth felt risky. This is what survival looks like when love is unpredictable. It's not people-pleasing, it's fawning, it's a trauma response. It's your body trying to create safety by vanishing inside your own life. Carl Jung called it the orphan archetype, that psychic wound left behind by betrayal, abandonment, and rejection. It's the voice inside that says, if I'm not what they want, they'll leave. So you became what they wanted. But in doing so, you left yourself. Here's the contradiction that makes healing so confusing. What protected you then is what's imprisoning you now. The smile you wear without meaning it, the silence you use to avoid conflict, the way you shrink just enough not to be noticed, hoping that disappearing is the same as being safe. You're not wrong for doing it. You were brilliant. But the danger is over, and the pattern is still running. So even now, when someone is kind to you, you flinch. Even now, when joy shows up, you prepare for loss. Even now, when you're alone, you forget how to speak in your own voice. It's not because you're broken, it's because your body still believes the war is happening, even though it ended years ago. And here's the turning point. You can't think your way out of it. You can only feel your way through. You can't logic yourself back into presence. You have to practice staying. staying when the discomfort rises, staying when your chest tightens, staying when your instinct says shrink, because staying is the new rebellion. And presence is the new safety. You don't owe the world your performance anymore. You don't have to say yes just to feel loved. You don't have to disappear just to avoid rejection. So ask yourself, gently, honestly, if disappearing kept me safe, what would showing up set free? You didn't just disappear from your life, you disappeared from yourself, and not because you were lost, but because you were no longer welcome. There was a time when your voice was soft, and that softness was misunderstood, when your joy was full, and someone rolled their eyes, when your needs were real, and no one showed up. That's when you began to vanish. Not all at once, but in quiet, strategic ways. You learned to shrink, you learned to monitor. You learn to become smaller than your own truth. Carl Jung called it the orphan archetype, a psychic wound formed when the soul is left alone in a room full of people. You weren't unloved, you were unseen. And that kind of loneliness cuts deeper than solitude. So you built your life around not being a burden. You stopped finishing your thoughts. You stopped asking for help. You stopped believing your presence had gravity. And eventually you stopped showing up. Internally, emotionally, spiritually. That's why even now when things are good, you can't feel them. Why love makes you suspicious. Why joy feels like a trap, because somewhere inside the orphan is still whispering, don't get used to this, it won't last. But the orphan isn't your enemy. It's your evidence. It's the part of you that remembers the wounds no one apologized for, the birthday that got forgotten, the moment you realized you were easier to love when we were quiet. And beneath all that sorrow, beneath the armor and the adjustments, lives someone else. Someone older than the fear, someone untouched by it. The innocent, the one who still believes, the one who trusts the light, even when it hurts to open their eyes. The one who still waits for you to come home. And yes, that return will feel strange, because you've lived so long outside of yourself that re-entering your body feels like trespassing. You're learning a language you used to speak fluently, one of breath and boundaries and joy. There's an old myth, a boy who, after his mother died, was taken in by bears. They kept him safe, taught him to be quiet, to be strong, to forget how to speak. And when the humans came back for him, he didn't remember his name, because the wildness had kept him alive, but it had also made him forget who he was. That's what dissociation feels like, not like giving up, but like being raised by something colder than love. But one day the boy steps out of the cave. One day he hears his name in the wind, and something in him remembers. That's what's happening to you now. You're hearing your own name again, not the name the world gave you. The one you whispered to yourself when no one else was listening. The part of you that you buried in silence is starting to speak again. And maybe that's what this journey really is. Not becoming something new, but returning to what you abandoned. There's another story. A flock of birds travels across deserts, oceans, mountains, searching for their divine king. They suffer, they lose feathers, they bury their dead, and finally, they arrive, but there's no king, only a mirror. And in that mirror, they see themselves. They were never missing a leader, they were missing themselves. You've been searching for safety, for answers, for someone to call you home, but maybe you are the one you've been waiting for. Not the orphan, not the mask, but the one who remembers, the one who says, I never left. You just stopped looking, but I've been here the whole time, quite whole, waiting for you to see me again. There comes a point when the mind says, I want to heal, but the body still says no. You feel the flutter in your chest, the tremble in your fingers, the instinct to run when nothing's chasing you, and you wonder, why can't I feel better? I'm doing everything right, but healing doesn't begin with thinking. It begins with permission, and your body hasn't felt safe enough to say yes. Dissociation is not a failure. It's an ancient survival response. Stephen Porges calls it dorsal vagal shutdown, a state where the body shuts down to protect itself. When fight and flight aren't options, the system goes offline. You freeze, you numb, you float above your life, and no one sees it, because you're still going to work, still texting back, still smiling in photos, but inside you're gone. That's why coming back hurts, because returning to the body means returning to everything you left there. The sorrow, the rage, the longing, the truth. The trembling is not weakness, it's the thaw. The tears you can't explain, that's your body processing years of silence. The sudden waves of fear in peaceful moments, that's your nervous system learning that stillness doesn't mean danger. There's a reason you flinch when someone says they love you, why you stiffen when someone hugs you, why you feel most alive when you're doing nothing, and most afraid at the same time. This is what it means to descend, to leave the performance, the productivity, the dissociation, and sink into the one place you were never meant to abandon yourself. In the Sumerian myth, Inanna descends into the underworld. At each gate, she's stripped of her crown, her robe, her power, until she stands bare before the dark. There, she's hung on a hook. Not dead, but in suspension. That's what healing often feels like, stripped, still, unknown. But Inanna is remembered, sung back into the world, and when she rises, she does so not with the same symbols, but with new power, integration, embodiment, wholeness. You're on your own descent. Every layer you peel back is a gate. Every sob, every tremble, every moment you choose not to run is an offering. Your body is not betraying you, it's protecting you. But now you have the chance to rewrite the message. You are not in danger anymore. You are safe. You are here, and every breath you stay, you teach your system a new language, presence. So let your voice shake, let your hands tremble, let the heat rise in your chest. It's not panic, it's return. Your soul is knocking on the door of your body, asking, is it safe to live here again? And if you're still afraid, that's okay, because fear is what healing feels like in a body that used to only know escape. So stay. Stay in the breath, stay in the ache, stay in the moment. Not because it's easy, but because it's yours. You don't owe the world your disappearance. You don't owe anyone your numbness. You owe yourself the chance to feel what you once had to forget. This is your body, this is your life, and this time you get to live it from the inside. Not everything that disappears is gone. Some things just go quiet, some things wait, and sometimes what you thought was lost was simply hiding until it felt safe to be seen again. That's how the soul moves, not with noise but with patience. There is no single moment of return, there is no triumphant re-entry, there is only presence. Breath that lands in your chest instead of floating above it, a laugh that surprises you with its sincerity, a tear that falls without needing to be explained. This is how the soul returns, not in a flood, but in fragments. And when it does, it doesn't ask for celebration, it asks for space. Carl Jung called this individuation, not the pursuit of perfection, but the integration of all that we are. The shadow and the light, the fear and the fire, the child and the survivor. When you were disappearing, you were not erasing yourself, you were exiling what felt unsafe to hold. But that exile is ending now. You're starting to feel again, not all the time, not without fear, but enough to know that something has shifted. You look in the mirror and you don't flinch. You say no and you don't shatter. You rest and you don't feel guilty. It's subtle, it's sacred, it's the beginning of belonging to yourself again. But here's the paradox. Coming back hurts because to reclaim what you left behind, you have to grieve the time you spent without it. You have to mourn the conversations you didn't show up for, the relationships you couldn't feel, the joy you couldn't receive. Grief is not a regression. It's a sign of return. It means you've landed. And now you can see what's missing, so cry. Cry not just for the pain, but for all the years you didn't cry when you should have. This is what healing sounds like. Not clarity, but sobbing, not certainty, but willingness. You're not here to erase what happened. You're here to reclaim the parts of you that went missing because of it. There's an art form called kintsugi, When a bowl is broken, it's repaired with gold. The cracks aren't hidden, they're illuminated. The wound becomes the beauty, the break becomes the art. You are that bowl, not ruined, reassembled, and more radiant for it. You no longer need to chase wholeness. You've carried it all along, in the shadow, in the numbness, in the tremble. This isn't about finding a new self, it's about remembering the one who was patient enough to wait for you. And when you look back, you'll see the one who vanished was the one who knew how to survive. The one who returned is the one who finally chose to live. So now the question shifts, not why did I disappear, but who am I now that I've come back? Who are you when you don't need to armor yourself just to walk through the day? Who are you when your joy doesn't feel like a betrayal? Who are you when your voice, your needs, your soul no longer ask for permission to exist? You're not just coming back, you're coming alive, and that changes everything. You don't need to earn your return, you only need to claim it. Because this life, this breath, this body was always yours. You didn't lose it. You stepped back when it didn't feel safe. You drifted when staying felt like drowning. You disconnected to protect something sacred. And now, for the first time in a long time, you are here, fully, honestly, now, not perfect, not fearless, but present. This is what the end of disappearance looks like. Not a spotlight, not applause, just a quiet moment where you stop holding your breath. A moment where your chest rises and falls and you don't have to brace for impact. Where your hands stop fidgeting because they no longer have to perform. Where you look into the mirror and instead of wondering who left, you recognize the one who stayed. You stayed, even when it hurt, even when you went silent, even when you felt like a shadow of yourself. Somewhere deep in the quiet you whispered, "Come back," and today you did. This is what wholeness feels like, not the absence of fear, but the presence of courage. Not a spotless soul, but a self who can finally hold its pain and not run from it. You're no longer disappearing, you're remaining. You're choosing presence even when it trembles. You're letting love land even when part of you expects it to leave. You are rewriting the story you thought you had to live forever. So take another breath, not because you need to, but because you can. Let it fill your lungs, settle in your bones, and say without words, "I am here." This is the sentence that changes everything. Not "I'm fine," not "I'll try," but "I am here." You were the absence, now you are the return. And if this journey reminded you of who you are, share it. Because someone else is still drifting, someone else is still smiling through the silence, someone else is still waiting for permission to come home. Leave a comment, not for validation, but as a signal, a beacon in the fog that says you're not alone. And disappearing is not the end of your story. You are not invisible, you are not too far gone, you are not behind. You are here, and we see you, and it's time. Welcome back.